Hello, everyone. Hello. Welcome to the webinar on liberal education presented by Sai University in association with The Hindu. I am Shubhashri Desikan, Senior Assistant Editor with The Hindu, and I will be moderating the session. It falls on me to introduce myself. I write in The Hindu on topics related to the basic sciences, and I have a PhD in physics. I'm speaking today about liberal education. And it occurs to me that as students, we were used to departments that specialized in disciplines, math, physics, history, biology, fine arts, etc. While you should be curious about the happenings in different buildings, you were bound to focus and confine yourself to one section among all these. But now, in real life problems, when you see, they are all complex and they benefit from and even demand interdisciplinary thinking. So when these walls between the disciplines are lowered, there's a scope to enact breakthroughs in real life problems. For example, I once wrote an article about how Indian scientists have developed a component for particle detectors that was inspired by origami, the Japanese art of paper folding. So when I read this and I read up on this, I found that there were many such applications that were ranged from architecture to spacecrafts that used origami techniques. To build these, you have to know art, science, and engineering, such a beautiful mix of three different subjects. So today, we need to even design software after learning about the people who are going to use it. This concept of ethical design is an interdisciplinary skill. It becomes more and more necessary for our software designers to study the humanities and understand people better. So we hope to get an overview of all this in this webinar on liberal education. And we have three very eminent speakers in today's program. Waiting to enlighten us are Mr. N.R. Narayanamurthy, co-founder and former chairman of Infosys. Mr. K.V. Ramani, founder and chancellor of Sai University. And Professor Jamshed Barucha, who's the vice chancellor of Sai University. We will first engage with Mr. Narayanamurthy, who will talk about the international models of liberal education. And then we will have Mr. Ramani, who will zoom in on the Indian scenario. And then we will have Professor Barucha, who will talk about the liberal education at Sai University. We will go back then to Mr. Narayanamurthy, who will explain about entrepreneurship and the role of the student and so on. So before we get into the program, it's my honor to introduce the speakers to you. Mr. Narayanamurthy needs no introduction really, but let me introduce him nevertheless. He is acknowledged as the guiding spirit at organizations spanning wide-ranging fields such as information technology, business administration, corporate governance, higher education, and scientific research. He's a recipient of numerous global awards and honors, and he was conferred the Padma Vibhushan, India's second highest civilian award by the Government of India in 2008. He's the co-founder and retired chairman of the Indian tech giant Infosys, where he was the CEO until 2002 and the chairman and chief mentor until 2011. Currently, Mr. Murthy serves on the boards of Ford Foundation, the Institute of Advanced Study at Princeton, New Jersey, which we all know housed Einstein at one point, and United Nations Foundation. He has served on the boards of corporations such as HSBC and Unilever, and of universities such as Cornell, Wharton School, the Graduate School of Business at Stanford University, and the Rhodes Trust at Oxford. He was the chairman of the Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad, and the Public Health Foundation of India. He's a member of the advisory board of the University of Tokyo, ESSEC Business School, France, IESE Business School, Spain, and so on. He has also served on the international advisory boards of Yale University, University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, and other places. He's a trustee of the Infosys Science Foundation, which gives the Infosys Prize, an annual award that honors outstanding achievement of researchers and scientists across 6 categories. He was conferred the Officer of the Legion of Honor by the government of France in 2008 and the Commander of the Order of the British Empire by the British government in 2007. In 2005, he was ranked among the Economist's 15 most admired global leaders. Thank you, Professor Dr. Narayanamurthy for coming to this program today. And the next person I will introduce you to is Mr. K.V. Ramani, who's a successful technology entrepreneur and a philanthropist, a pioneer who led efforts in bringing India's IT sector to the fore. He also co-founded NASCOM in 1988. He's the founder and chancellor of Sai University, a private university near Chennai. His mission has been to set up a multidisciplinary university which breaks away from the convention of focusing on disciplines and to ensure students become critical thinkers. His vision has led to the foundation of Sai University this April. In 1985, he founded Future Software and later co-founded Hughes Software System, both of which were later acquired by Flexitronics. He served as a chairman of NASCOM during 97 to 98 and was a member of its executive council for the first 10 years. He has taken on several roles in developing the IT sector in India with the Department of Electronics, the 9th five-year plan, the Electronics and Computer Software Export Promotion Council, and more. He founded the Chennai chapter of the Indus Entrepreneurs. Mr. K.V. Ramani has been honored with several awards. He was given the Founders Award at NASCOM Silver Jubilee by Sri Narendra Modi, to mention just one. A well-known philanthropist, he channels his charitable gestures through the Shirdi Sai Trust set up by him in 1996. Welcome to the program, sir, and I look forward to interacting with you. Professor Jamshed Bharucha, the founding Vice Chancellor of Sai University, is the President Emeritus of Cooper Union, New York. Previously, he was Provost and Senior Vice President at Tufts University, Dean of the School of Arts and Science, Dartmouth College, Fellow Center of Advanced Study and in the Behavioral Sciences at Stanford University. He was a visiting scholar at Harvard, Stanford, and Carnegie Mellon universities. Professor Bharucha has done extensive research in the cognitive psychology sector and neurosciences, especially with a focus on music perception. That itself is an interdisciplinary area which we would like to mention here. He has been decorated with many awards, is a Pride of America honoree, and has been given the Huntington Teaching Award by Dartmouth College. He's also an alumnus of Yale University, Vassar College, and Trinity College of London. Welcome to the program, Dr. Bharucha. And now I will like to invite Professor Narayanamurthy to say, Dr. Narayanamurthy to say a few words. And I will maybe we have some questions lined up for you, sir, and I hope we can go on with that.
Dr. Desikan, if you ask me specific questions, I will try and answer them.
Let us start at the very beginning, sir. How do you define liberal education?
Well, liberal education or liberal arts education is an important component of the education system. I have observed from experience that education in general and liberal arts education in particular have the potential to prepare our youngsters to acquire a mindset capable of, one, thinking deeply and critically about an issue, to discover the issue's positives and negatives, and to offer constructive solutions to the problem on hand. Second, forming logical and rational arguments using data, facts, and logic. Third, marshalling the power of articulation, the power of formal knowledge, independent thinking, and analysis to present a sound judgment on an issue. Fourth, using rudimentary knowledge of mathematics, statistics, modeling, and facts of the situation to come to an optimal decision in a given situation, even with limited data. Fifth, the ability to enter a new situation, absorb new knowledge, ask deep and relevant questions, and add value to the discussions. Sixth, overcoming biases. Seventh, desisting from offering unfounded opinions not supported by data and facts. Next, respecting plurality of opinion and conducting oneself in a civilized manner in a discussion. Next, listening to other participants in a discussion actively. And finally, I would say agreeing to disagree without being disagreeable. After all, this is what 90% of life is all about. At least 90% of work life is all about. This is what is required of every successful leader, manager, professional, and academician. Liberal arts education uses tools and methods to enhance curiosity, improve our ability to think critically and independently, become analytical and objective, and finally, of course, all of this to solve the problems of our society. Liberal arts education combines a host of studies, going from philosophy to humanities, and lays the foundation for our youngsters to pursue deeper knowledge and skills required in whatever profession or graduate degree they choose to pursue to become scientists, professionals, academicians, managers, civil servants, politicians, journalists, diplomats, and even military folks. At the same time, it also helps them to directly enter any of these professions. Let me stop here.
That was a very comprehensive definition. But you have been associated with many universities across the world, and you have experience with that. What are your views about different liberal education models across the world?
The urgent need of the day for our country is to adopt a model of education that provides a strong and enduring foundation for curiosity, for critical thinking, for proactive problem solving, innovation wherever necessary, objective evaluation of situations, debating issues with data and facts, respecting plurality of thought, agreeing to disagree without being disagreeable. Now, these skills come from the liberal arts education model. Liberal arts education students study a little bit of philosophy, economics, history, humanities, languages, mathematics, logic, sciences, and a few other subjects wherever necessary. English is a universal language, and mathematics is the most concise and precise way of communicating. In my opinion, any education system must provide some foundation into these two jewels of learning. Now, most developed nations have adopted the liberal education model. It is this model that has laid the foundation for the undisputed global leadership of the Western nations in politics, arts, music, science, technology, law, philosophy, economics, and medicine, just to name a few fields. Everything I see in front of me here at my table, piano, computer, LED light bulb, stereo, air conditioner, refrigerator, and mobile phone, have all been invented because of using this model of education. This model combines combined with the power of English language has become an unstoppable and an unbeatable force of progress in the world. English language provides access to the largest and the most precious repository of knowledge, wisdom, skills, and experience. Now, I know at least 4 nations, the US, the UK, Australia, and France, reasonably well. I've spent considerable time in these nations. I have tremendous admiration for their education system. These nations have benefited immensely from this model. The focus in this model of education is on, as I said before, independent think and proactive problem solving. Obtaining PhD in a developed nation is an excellent example of independent thinking. The student has to think independently and zero in on a topic of his thesis, himself or herself. The guide will not suggest the thesis topic to the student. After all, problem recognition and definition are the ultimate tests of independent thinking and proactive problem solving. Let me stop here.
But could you briefly go into the Oxbridge models and the Ivy League models? Can you briefly do that before we can go to the next question?
Yeah, I will talk about, I presume you're asking me to compare the Ivy League model with the Oxbridge model?
Yes. Before that, maybe for the new young participants we have in the listeners who are watching, we can define the Ivy League. There are 8 universities in the US, private universities, which are among the top universities in the US.
Yeah.
And
okay. So what is it? Are you saying what is it that India can learn from the education system of these Ivy League universities?
Yes.
Is that the question?
Yes. Before that, you could maybe just tell us a little bit about the Ivy League universities itself, what you have learned from the being on the education boards of these universities.
Yeah. You know, in addition to being on the board of several of these universities, I have made it a point to sit in many undergraduate classes in several Ivy League universities. The focus of these classes have been on analytical and critical thinking, independent thinking, Socratic questioning, development of argumentation, and on problem solving. Now, what is it that India can learn from the Ivy League institutions? This question can be answered by my describing what is it that happens in a classroom in an Ivy League class. First, the students come prepared for the classes. They have done their homework. But I find that homework is a very, very important part of Ivy League classes. Teaching is interactive. They mostly use Socratic method of questioning aimed at improving deep and critical thinking. The teacher introduces a new idea in the class, and the students are encouraged to think deeply and to ask questions that bring clarity to the ideas. A good example of this is the course on justice, which is a set of 12 lectures delivered by Professor Michael Sandel at Harvard for sophomore students and available on YouTube. I would request all the youngsters on this, on the cloud, to kindly go into YouTube and then watch these 12 lectures on justice. That will teach us, that will tell us how a classical Ivy League interactive teaching goes. The next one is the pace of teaching is pretty fast. I once sat in my son's honor version of automata theory and computability class in his junior year at Cornell. I was amazed at how much material was covered just in 1 hour. Next, I find that the examinations are often open book. Almost all questions are about assessing whether you have understood the theory well enough to apply it to solve real world problems. I've also found that courses provide ample opportunity to improve the writing skills by requiring the students to submit essays on critical issues relevant to the courses almost every week. This particularly happens in philosophy, in economics, in government, etc., in such courses. And finally, I must say that nobody other than the teacher decides what textbook to use, what is to be taught in the course, how it is to be taught, and how the student should be evaluated. The teacher is the ultimate decision maker. Let me stop here.
It's amazing how one is able to go and sit in classes and listen. That process that you're describing is really wonderful and not probably followed by many universities.
Yeah, I think once you obtain the permission of the teacher, they all welcome. They are very open-minded. They welcome you to sit in the class, and by and large, the convention is that guests like me who sit in the class don't ask any questions, but that's a norm, but you learn a lot.
Can you now compare it with the Oxbridge models, the Oxford and Cambridge models?
Dr. Deshkan, this is an excellent question. I was on the board of Rhodes Trust at Oxford for several years. It gave me an opportunity to meet students and tutors at colleges in Oxford. I have no experience with Cambridge University. However, when I was working in Paris in the early 70s, I used to guide a couple of students who were taking the national competitive tests. It's like our JEE for admission to École Polytechnique. So I am also quite familiar with the Ivy League model. I will speak only about non-science and non-mathematics courses, since that is where the differences are sharper between Oxford and the Ivy League model. Both these models are quality models, absolutely no doubt about it. The Oxford undergraduate degree uses the one-on-one or sometimes one-on-two tutorial model to focus on individual homework, critical thinking, questioning, analysis, argumentation, essay writing, and decision making. It's generally in 3 subjects. The most famous course at Oxford, as you people know, is PPE. That is, it is globally acclaimed, and it is philosophy, politics, and economics. The focus at Oxford is on individual effort and on the purity and quality of analytical thinking. However, this model is teacher resource intensive and is not easily scalable. On the other hand, the Ivy League institutions use the one-to-many classroom model to provide an equally strong foundation for developing these attributes on a broader canvas, with an emphasis on improving individual skills using classroom-based Socratic questioning, peer-to-peer learning, and intensive homework, including essay writing. Ivy League universities also focus on developing a robust foundation to understand the theory well enough to apply that theory to solve problems of current daily life. These attributes, in my opinion, are much needed for handling the complexity of the modern world and for making progress in the world of today. Let me stop here.
Thank you. There is another question which will be very interesting to our viewers. How does a liberal education translate into a career opportunity? What kind of opportunity?
You know, I have repeated many times already that liberal arts education is primarily focused on analysis, critical thinking, forming sound and logical arguments, on judgment, and decision making with limited data under uncertainty. These attributes, as we all know, are essential for any job or for pursuing any graduate degree, or what we call in India, postgraduate degree, that the students are likely to take up after completing their undergraduate liberal education degree. There is a huge paucity of such skills in India today. They are also necessary for taking up any graduate professional degrees like MD, JD, and PhD. Liberal education gives you the basic tools for acquiring advanced skills and use them for the benefit of the society by taking up jobs, or to go deeper into what the Germans called Wissenschaft, that is learning for learning's sake. Liberal education helps you in lifelong education, which is, after all, learning to learn. I know lots of people who did their undergraduate liberal arts degree in history before going on to doing their MD, that is the MBBS in India. They have become top-notch surgeons. I know several liberal arts graduates who have become famous presidents in the US, prime ministers in Canada and in the UK, CEOs, senators, secretaries of state, journalists, bureaucrats, economists, lawyers, scientists, corporate leaders, and policy specialists in the US, UK, Australia, and France. Similarly, I know several corporate leaders with liberal arts degrees. I know many successful professionals with liberal arts degree working very successfully at Wall Street firms, in IBM, in New York Times, at Microsoft, at Google, or even in a manufacturing, banking, or even a pharmaceutical company. Let me stop here.
That sounds really like the sky is the limit.
It is. I think it is, because at the end of the day, it teaches you to develop argument. It teaches you to be rational. It teaches you to use data and facts for arguing. It teaches you deep thinking, critical thinking. These are necessary for pursuing anything you want in life, whether it is a job or whether it is to go on to do a specialization later.
What is your opinion about the prevalent system of higher education in India? Does it prepare students well for the challenges and opportunities of the future?
The current educational system in India has become focused on acquiring knowledge. Knowledge can be easily acquired. It's available in textbooks and on internet. What is, however, at premium is to use that knowledge either to make judgments in situations or to create new knowledge. I define learnability as the ability to extract generic inferences out of specific instances and use them in new unstructured situations to solve new problems. This is what liberal education is all about. My own personal feeling is that our coaching classes have weakened the learnability of our students to think independently and to solve new problems. Problems at work, as you know, Dr. Deshikan, cannot be solved by going to coaching classes. What is needed are analysis, critical and independent thinking, logic-based argumentation, and decision-making under uncertainty. Coaching classes do not provide these attributes. These attributes are just not available in the current education system. Fortunately, new institutions like Sai University and some others are coming up and focusing on these attributes. I have no doubt at all that these new institutions will transform the educational foundation of India and make our country a strong place for progress and innovation. Let me stop here.
Thank you very much, Mr. Narayanmurthy. And I think this is the set of questions that we had for you initially. I would now invite Mr. Ramani to come and speak. Please continue, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Subhashri. I think before I speak, I think I must add the generous introduction you gave about Narayanmurthy. A couple of things that I think you missed out. One is a dear friend of mine, as Murthy himself said, for 35 years. Number two, he is one of the governing board members of Sai University, who has been the person with whom I have tossed this idea of Sai University in the early stages about 3.5 years ago, when he considered Sai University, how to structure it, how to design the university, how to evolve curriculum, how to design the programs to become a globally eminent university. Therefore, I think I owe a special thanks to Mr. Murthy for being there for us whenever we wanted his advice and guidance. Second thing I'd also like to ask if you have any questions, or should I just continue talking with that?
Could you just talk about liberal education in India and for about 10 minutes?
Okay. Before we go into liberal education in India, I think we should talk about the higher education situation in India. I would like to come at the top-down level. First of all, if you see, India has over 1,000 universities, from whatever I refer from UGC sites. More than 700 universities are privately owned. And a few hundred of the universities are owned by the government, by the central government, or the state government, or sponsored by this government. So one factor that I can tell you to look at the simple way of looking at higher education in India is that after the 75th year of independence, we do not have one university from India in the top 100 universities of the world. Not even one. You know, if you go by, there are two globally well-known, respected rankings for global universities. One is called the Times ranking, the Times of the US ranking, and the other one is called the QS ranking. If you take any of these rankings, they rank universities around the world. The highest is IIT. One of the IITs comes at 125. All of the IITs come between 125 and 150. The private universities are way beyond 200 and 300, and some are in 600 and 700, the global ranking. So what have we achieved in 75 years? That should tell you, that actually should shock you a little bit to find out where the higher education in India is today. Just to look back at our own history, 4,000 years ago, India was one of the most ancient civilizations. You take Nalanda and Harappa, or even today's morning papers, that if you see that new findings are discovered even in Tamil Nadu, Kiladi, and other places, they made some discoveries in Gujarat. We have had civilizations here 3,000 to 4,000 years ago. And we've had recorded history of, international visitors from around the world coming to India for acquiring knowledge, the wisdom, not only the knowledge, the wisdom from India. What has it gone? Where has it gone? We've lost it completely. Why did we lose it? I don't know. What have we done in 75 years? We're completely, producing what do we call a system of people who were driven by, in my opinion, a completely wrong purpose in life, marks. Today, the higher education system in India is completely all about transforming to marks. So the success of a student is defined by whether you've got 98% or 99% or 95%. And the cutoff marks, many institutions that are, nationally important institutions are saying our cutoff this year is 100%. If your cutoff is 100%, what is the purpose of the institution training this? The student can well learn themselves, I'm sure. So the higher education system in India, in my opinion, has produced people who are good in memorizing and repeating an exam. I do know for a fact that, for example, our students, perhaps who are in the 12th standard, have been taught by the schools to remember keywords in their answers, and in fact, if possible, underline them. This is what they taught in their mock exams in the school, so that your person who was examiner or correcting a paper doesn't miss out that you know the answers by underlining the keywords in their own papers. So the question in higher education in India has become, how do you memorize? How do you reproduce? How do you highlight the keywords? And how do you get above the 90% or 95% cutoff so you can get into a good institution? And then the next question immediately is, the first question that pops up in the minds of a parent or a student is, what are the placement opportunities? Can I get a job? So I do understand that, it is a concern of every parent and every student, rightfully so. And make sure as an education is a path to progress in terms of their own personality, as well as in terms of their own economic levels. That is the ultimate objective, I agree. But there has to be a certain amount of innovation, creativity, as Mr. Murthy said, ability to think logically, analytically, solve problems. And that's completely absent in our education system. And if you take the, I'll follow through with the remaining few minutes given to you, given to me by you, to talk about liberal education in India. The way that, I see liberal education as slightly differently from what Mr. Murthy said, you focus more on liberal arts. And the way we see liberal education as, I see a liberal education as a system or an education suitable for the cultivation of a free mind and a free human being. You should open up your mind. You should open your thought process. You should be, the ancient Indian wisdom says, let knowledge flow from everywhere. And you should be able to absorb the knowledge that comes from around the world, from whoever says it doesn't matter. Caste, creed, religion has no place in education system. Our liberal education system is ultimately designed to develop the human mind and the human life. So you're able to look at your life in a completely different perspective. It doesn't come in packages. Today, Indian education system comes in packages. You take physics, you have to take chemistry and mathematics. If you take economics, you have to take philosophy or psychology and statistics. That's it. I mean, you don't have an option. This is what you're forced with. That's a structure. Your predefined structure +2, which is marks. Your predefined structure of a college, which is, you say, this is the package I can offer you. I can make a timetable. It's been running for 15 years. I don't want to change hours. The faculty has speeches ready and the subjects and, even evaluation systems are ready. They don't want to change anything. They don't want to upset the apple cart. But liberal education is the complete opposite. It's not about treating subjects as in silos. In simple terms, liberal arts education should allow a student to go beyond watertight categories of disciplines. It should go, in my view, across disciplines. That's what we're trying to do in Sai University. It should go across science, it should go across commerce, it should go across humanities, it should go across social sciences, and should create, a student should be able to pick and select a group of subjects which are of interest to the students. It's a bouquet of, 12 offerings or 25 offerings. You go and pick what you like. It could be that you do a physics major, an economics minor, and a music minor. There's no university in India which offers that, which is what we're trying to offer in Sai University. I'm sure Professor Balucha will talk more about it, so I'm not getting into that space. The key, therefore, in my mind, is liberal education in India is constricted by preset patterns of courses, marks, getting, jobs. Ultimate purpose is to get good career, good lifestyle is undeniable. But you can achieve it many ways. But when you go straitjacket, the opportunity to create entrepreneurs, opportunity to create scientists, opportunity to create innovators, it becomes too limited because people are set into one steady stream of thinking only. They are not open to critical thinking, analytical thinking, logical thinking, tech abilities, communication skills. All of that is lacking. So I'm sure Professor Barucha will talk about it. So in my mind, the innovations required in Indian higher education are a transformation of our education system. Not that we copy either the Ivy League model of the US universities or the Oxford Cambridge model of the UK or the UCOL model in France or the Tokyo University model or INEOS model in Singapore. All of them are great universities around the world. But I think we should have a model which is suitable to us based on our situation, which is required for Indian situation, which is far different from the Western developed economies. So I believe that our program that he needs to do as innovations required, you talked about in higher education, is what we are already planning is early stage in the student life in undergrads were mostly boys and girls of age 17. They don't even know what subject they actually want to study. They take up what their parents tell them with all good intention, or what the teachers and counselors in school tell them, or where their best friend is going, so that they can study together, they can be the same class, and so on and so forth. But within a period of 1 year or so, they feel completely disillusioned. And then they say, okay, am I going to finish this course and am I going to get a job? Or am I going to get another degree and get to a job? So the objective of education is lost, and the objective of completing the program and getting a job becomes more important. In my mind, the innovation required in higher education is a complete transformation of higher education in India to suit Indian system, which is primarily to say, first, we should promote, as Mr. Murthy said, critical thinking, analytical thinking, logical abilities, tech skills, communication skills, and so on and so forth. In fact, in Sai University, in the first semester, we only teaching these subjects. In the second semester, they get a bouquet of 12 courses or so, 12 or 15 courses. They can pick and choose 6 or 8 of them. They can take a physics major with a economics minor and a sports minor. And then this is called a choose your own major and minor program. And then at the end of sampling the 5 or 6 courses in the second semester, they really decide what major and minor they want to do. They want to take in their second, third, fourth years of undergrad degree. And then, of course, they continue to do their master's and PhD, more and more specialized in areas of interest to them. So progressively, the foundation should be broad and strong. It should be wide. And the higher degrees should build on the strength of the foundation. And that is why in Sai University, we're creating this structure, which I'm sure Professor Barucha will talk more about it. I'll be, taking any other questions later on in the conversation. That's my view, to say the transformation in Indian higher education has to happen by a multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary approach to education. And the students can cultivate and study subjects of their own choice and careers of their own selection. Thank you.
Thank you. Actually, that was a very nice, illuminating short talk. We will have questions at the end of the session after we go back to Mr.
Sure.
Narayanamurthy. But now I invite Dr. Barucha to speak a few words on about 10 minutes on liberal education in Sai University.
Thank you very much. It's a privilege to be here and to be on this panel. Nothing is more important than the topic of this panel. And it's the topic of this panel that brought me back to India after 40 years in education in the United States. Why? Because this is India's moment. We know we have a youth dividend, but if we don't develop the talents of that youth, it's going to become a youth liability. So this is the moment where India must move very fast to create new institutions and to reform the older ones to prepare our youth to maximize their innate talents, because that will be key to the success of India and to the success of democracy, and frankly, because of India's size and being the largest democracy, really to the global future. Let me talk about a few things that make our model, the model we've developed, and the reason I came and joined is for us to be able to forge a unique model that is designed to prepare students for the future. So many ask about jobs. A liberal education is actually key to a successful career and a fulfilling life. Something that everybody in India now in the higher education sphere knows and worries about is that for the first time in history, the first job you get will not be the job that you're going to be at for the rest of your career. There was a time when you got a job with a good company and you stayed with the company and you retired with the company and the company paid you benefits. It is widely acknowledged that that era is largely over because the world is changing so fast. You may get your first job doing coding in Python or coding in Java. I can assure you, by mid-career or even earlier of a graduate, those languages will be obsolete. They will be like we're thinking about Fortran. In fact, many coding jobs are going to be eliminated simply because of advances in computing. There will be automatic coding, which is why the key is, as Mr. Murthy mentioned, the ability to solve unknown problems and the confidence of doing that. If you think about the ladder of cognitive skills, as computers get smarter and smarter, and they are, we have to stay 2 steps ahead up the cognitive ladder, because we have to be able to add value in terms of solving problems that we don't know, and computers still cannot do that. Also, solving the world's problems. At Sai University, we prepare students not just to have good careers and fulfilling lives, but with a sense of responsibility to think about the world beyond themselves. Because anybody who gets a good higher education is in a privileged position. And there's a responsibility, a duty, to use your education and your profession to make the world a better place around you, whether it's at the community level, national level, global level. Now, another thing is that our students will face challenges that we cannot possibly anticipate. We'll be using technologies that we cannot possibly anticipate, which is why the traditional educational model of the transfer of knowledge is now obsolete. Sure, you do have to transfer some knowledge. Knowledge is important. But what's more important, which is what Mr. Murthy emphasized, is being able to learn to solve new kinds of problems, learn to invent, learn to frame new problems. And the traditional education system is completely antithetical to any of that, which is why we're starting Sai University. Some specific themes that make Sai University distinctive, in addition to these, include the following. There are liberal arts universities coming up in India. Most of them are focused on humanities and social sciences and arts, and that's great, and it's fulfilling a major need. We see liberal education as the full spectrum of disciplines, of occupations, of life aspirations, including technology. So for example, if somebody wants to get a degree in computer science in India, they assume they have to go to an engineering college, right? It never occurs to anyone that you might do computer science or data science in a liberal education context. We are the first in India, I believe, to do that. So a student can get a BSc or a BA, but a student can also get a BTech in computing and data science, and will be part of the same undergraduate liberal ecosystem as the arts and sciences students. So for example, most Indian engineering institutions, they look up to MIT, which is a great institution, but our model at Sai is more the Harvard undergraduate model than the MIT undergraduate model. You come to Harvard and you may choose after a year to major in computer science, data science, music, philosophy, and combine these things. So it's the liberal arts plus technology and the full spectrum, which is why I tend not to use the word liberal arts in India, because most people associate it with just arts and humanities and social sciences. Liberal education is the right term because it encompasses everything. Now, I come to this as a cognitive neuroscientist, and I've come to the conclusion after decades of teaching and doing research and higher education administration that, and it's not just Indian universities that need reform, it is the Ivies and the institutions that we're all looking up to that have kind of become static in a sense and need some change, particularly in the pedagogy. The pedagogy needs to change because research on how the brain learns, which is what I bring to the design of Sai University. I don't implement anything at Sai University unless it is evidence-based, evidence-driven. The brain learns best by doing. And doing includes speaking, it includes solving problems, it includes collaborating. It learns worst by just sitting and listening to somebody tell you things, okay? And that is another point that Mr. Murthy made. So that's typically called active learning. Active learning is interactive learning, but it's more than interactive learning because you're getting your students into the habit of not just asking questions, but posing new ideas, encouraging them to think of ideas that have never been thought before and take a risk on them. You'll have those 3 or 4 years as an undergraduate to take intellectual risks, and we need to encourage our students to make mistakes. It's a terrible thing about traditional education is that it's all about not making a mistake. The best kind of learning, including coding, comes from jumping in there, making mistakes, and then the time you spent debugging it or thinking about the mistake or the feedback that you get, and then that's what gets you to a new level of understanding. And I can assure you, those students who come out of this kind of model at Sai University, by the time they graduate, it doesn't matter if they major in music or philosophy or computer science or data science or economics. As soon as they get into that interview for a job or for a postgraduate program, they're going to stand out because they will have had that training. Today, students suddenly they get on the job market and suddenly they find they have to interview, which they've never done before, and they have to get into small group discussions, which they've never done before. So we want students, we want to find each individual student's unique talents. No two brains are identical. It is a huge tragedy that institutionalized education tries to put people into these boxes. Okay, you're in science, you are in arts, you are in commerce, you are in this, you are in that. Massive mistake. We leave a tremendous amount of talent on the table. Why do I say that? It comes back to an earlier point that the future economic growth, cultural dynamism, and of democracy depends not on the things we know today, but on the things our students are going to invent, discover, think about, imagine, in the sciences and technology and in the arts and the humanities, new ideas, new ways of organizing people, new kinds of ways of serving society. So we can't teach them. Actually, their brains come after millions of years of evolution. The brain has a much more powerful, autonomous learning agenda than anything we can put into a curriculum. From the moment you're born, the child explores the environment and is trying new sounds, and the mistake in parenting is saying, do this, don't do that. Rather, flip it around, which is what we're doing at Sai University. Provide an enriching environment where there is quick feedback, constructive feedback, never talking down to children, never talking down to students, always encouraging them. You know, a child goes through a period of saying, why, but why, but why, but why. Most parents and teachers say, just be quiet and listen. Huge, huge mistake. And the research is all very clear about that. If you let the brain probe and you serve as the enriching ecosystem and the feedback and the guide, as Mr. Murthy mentioned, the child will come up very, very fast. We want to spark their imagination. We want them to think of crazy things. I want my students in class to come up with things just, and never to say, that's a silly question, that's a stupid idea. Well, let's analyze it. If it is absurd, then the other students, of course, will be quick to point that out. Instructor can do that, but then you find the kernel and you try to develop that and critique it. And liberate the mind from the boxes that we're taught. So many times you meet people coming out of a traditional education and you ask them a question and they say, I never took a course in that. That was not on the syllabus. That was not on the curriculum. That is a symptom of the failure of the system. You want them to push against the boundaries. And one thing that's difficult culturally for an ancient culture, we want students to challenge us. Some of the most brilliant students I've had in the middle of a class challenged me. Undergraduates I'm talking about. Challenged me, and I would go, what? And then I'd go home and think about it, and these are, you know, innocent minds are actually more creative than those of us who are. We want to nurture our students' cognitive powers, and I'm just finishing up here. The most important cognitive powers are the ones that Mr. Murthy mentioned: critical thinking, and communication. And at Sai University, critical thinking and communication will be an integral part of every single course, every single semester. Finally, our model of international is absolutely unique. We have brought in a faculty member from Tufts University, Sherman Teichman, who has developed an astonishing immersive international model for undergraduate education. We all know about semester abroad, that's fine. Most Indians can't afford semester abroad. He puts undergraduates into the middle of international projects all over the world, or now even virtual projects, and connects our students with international networks, very powerful networks of leaders, students, faculty. We believe that by doing that, starting in the very first day of the first year of the undergraduate, that model will be well on its way to creating truly global citizens and global leaders within, of course, our unique Indian context. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Barucha. That was a very illuminating talk. Now we would go back to Mr. Narayanamurthy for some insights. Can we talk now, sir?
Yes.
I have a few more questions for you.
No, I'm ready.
So, what qualities do Indian tech companies look for in a graduate?
Well, I think that again is a very seminal question. The need of Indian technology companies is hiring people who can bring proactive problem solving. These professionals have to recognize their customers' problems before the customer himself or herself does, and suggest preemptive solutions. That is probably the world's best consultant. So we want to hire such people. This requires, obviously, subject matter expertise that Professor Barucha spoke, Sri Ramani spoke. It requires critical thinking. It requires ability to speak flawless English, because that is the universal language, whether we like it or not. That is the universal language. It requires high learnability that I already spoke about. As you remember, I defined learnability as the ability to extract generic inferences from specific instances and use them in new unstructured situations to solve new problems. Then, of course, it requires modeling, it requires what-if analysis, it requires a little bit of mathematics, a little bit of logic, a little bit of statistics, and most importantly, decision-making under uncertainty and decision-making with limited data. Now, I am very happy that Professor Barucha spoke so eloquently, so well on how Sai University is equipped to provide our youngsters these capabilities. I am very, very happy that we have a place now in India that is dedicated to opening the minds of our youngsters. Now, Indian companies also want their employers to adapt to the nuances of other cultures quickly and gain the confidence of their customers abroad. Because as you know, if you look at the top 5 software companies, technology companies, 90 to 95% of their revenue comes from outside India. In some cases, 98% comes from outside India. What this means is day after day after day, we are dealing with people of other cultures. Therefore, we have to focus on learnability, because today I'm dealing with an Australian customer. Tomorrow I go and deal with a Dutch customer. Day after tomorrow I go and deal with a Spanish customer. And the fourth day I deal with a Japanese customer. So ability to learn new skills, new aspects of new cultures, that becomes very important. That's where I spoke about learnability, and that's the most important skill that Indian companies look for. I used to use a set of puzzles to assess the learnability of the trainees I selected. And then, of course, there is the issue of the quality of written and spoken English. That unfortunately is deteriorating in India, but that's something that has to be corrected. And I'm glad that Sai University is going to do that, because that is a big worry for the industry. Let me stop here.
Thank you. What are the qualities of a successful entrepreneur, and can that be actually taught in a college?
Well, Dr. Desikan, an entrepreneur observes the current environment carefully, identifies the lacuna or the lacunae, and thinks of an idea that can overcome that lacunae or those that lacuna or those lacunae. An entrepreneur is consequently focused on reducing cost, improving productivity, removing obstacles, improving convenience and comfort, and enhancing the quality of either whatever is already available in the market, or through the creation of a new product. He or she is able to sell his or her idea very well by articulating his or her idea in a simple, stunning sentence, and not as a compound or complex sentence to customers, employees, and investors. Because compound and complex sentences using what if, nevertheless, etc., are difficult to understand. Customers don't have that much time to listen to you. New prospective employees don't have so much time to listen to you, because there is so much of competition for new employees, and investors have a lot of choices to invest. So therefore, entrepreneurs must learn to articulate their idea as a simple sentence. Now, entrepreneurs must also lead by example in values, in innovation, in hard work, in sacrifice, and in generosity. They must also believe in deferred gratification, because at the end of the day, as Ramani knows very well, and I also know, entrepreneurship is all about deferred gratification. That is, making huge sacrifices today in the hope that tomorrow will bring a fortune to us. Now, the second part of your question, some of the qualities of entrepreneurs, like curiosity, solution orientation, multidisciplinary approach to problems, articulation, and confidence, and a few other things that Professor Barucha spoke about so well, they come from the environment and the education system. On the other hand, some attributes like values, courage, and generosity, teamwork, etc., they come from social milieu, from family, and from teachers and bosses. That's what I'd like to say.
Thank you. It's interesting that you put generosity as a factor there. And, that's something very I have not heard anyone say.
I'm glad that you referred to that, because a very important attribute of a successful leader is to be generous, to share the limelight with his colleague, with his other colleagues, to make his or her colleagues feel an inch taller in the leader's presence, and to praise in public and criticize in private. Let me stop here.
Thank you. I have one more question. And how can India become more of a leader in innovation?
You know, based on what Sri Ramani and Professor Barucha so eloquently described, my belief is that universities like Sai University are our best hope for India's future, for India embracing innovation. I believe that institutions like Sai University will transform this country and bring a new confidence, a new hope, a new enthusiasm on the world stage for Indian youngsters. I believe in the focus of Sai University on analytical thinking, interdisciplinary approach, logical argumentation, essay writing, flawless communication, and other homework, Socratic questioning, and decision making under uncertainty with limited data. Now, I want our youngsters, I want Sai University to include in their coursework how to answer 3 fundamental questions by the youngsters when they enter their workplace every day. The questions are, how do I reduce tomorrow the time for what I do today? Second, how do I reduce tomorrow the cost of what I do today? And the third one is, how do I improve the quality tomorrow of what I produce today? If Sai University can include the various methods of answering these questions, of course, they will vary from situation to situation, from industry to industry, from country to country, etc. However, a generic approach to answering these 3 questions is what will Sai University help add value to our youngsters in creating such a mindset. If our youngsters can create such a mindset, I have no doubt at all that thanks to institutions like Sai University, India will make a rapid progress on the path of innovation and enhance the prosperity of the country and remove poverty. My Best wishes to Sai University. Let me stop here.
Thank you. Just recalls my mind the Mars orbiter mission, which was praised, which would probably qualify in all three counts.
Of course, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Murthy. And so, can I briefly summarize the point? Would anyone like to say something, add a point here or there? Okay. Mr. Ramani, would you like to say something?
I would certainly like to thank Mr. Murthy for the final 3 pointers he gave to us to include in Sai University's programs on how do we reduce the time to produce, the cost of product or service, and improve the quality of the product. We will certainly include that as a part of the thinking and problem-solving courses to see that our undergraduate students come up with it. Because as we said, this is clearly the path to innovation.
Yeah.
If a product is doing something today, and if you take a mobile phone, if I can make it perform better in terms of battery life, let's say, how can I improve it? How can I improve the performance of the phone? How can I reduce the cost of the phone? And each one of that will lead to an innovation. So the 3 pointers he talked about, time, cost, and quality, to make sure that we come up with better innovation. We will certainly include that, Mr. Murthy, in our programs to make people think about these aspects of their problem-solving process. One thing which I just like to add before I hand over to you, Dr. Bashi, is that Sai University is designed to be a globally eminent university. That's a vision we have for the university. We want Sai University in the next 10 years to be known as a global university, not another Indian university of thousands of them. So whatever we're designing today, it may be an innovation in Indian higher education, but it is certainly for the improvement of the student's life, certainly for the betterment of the parents and their families of the students, and certainly for the betterment of the society, and for the betterment of the India as a whole, and perhaps the whole world as a whole. Because we do want to see the next generation of innovation and tech companies to come from India, from our next generation. As Professor Barucha pointed out, that we have the greatest advantage in the world of having the largest of the youth in the world. So the dividend of the youthful population can only be challenged if we can channel their energies into innovation through proper higher education, through proper postgraduate education, through research, through ideating and challenging existing products and services to come up with new products and services. I think the entire spectrum of people, from the students, the parents, the society, the country, the whole world will benefit. That's our purpose. We made small steps today, and I'm going to quote back what Neil Armstrong said when he landed on the moon, that is one small step for me, but a giant leap for mankind. And I believe those are very powerful words for the first human being to have landed on planet Moon. So what we are seeing today is first step for Sai University, but it'll be a giant leap for India and the global world through our students and the faculty and the researchers in the future. Thank you.
You know, allow me to add just one. Yes, come in. Add one sentence. It may be useful for you people. You know, George Bernard Shaw was once asked, what is unique about innovators, about people who think new? And he said, and of course that was later used by late Robert Kennedy. And George Bernard Shaw said, most people see things as they are and wonder why. I dream of things that never are and then say, why not? I think if you people can use this as your as your motto at Sai University, for your students to be equipped to achieve what George Bernard Shaw said, it'll be fantastic. That is, most people see things as they are and wonder why. I dream of things that never were and then say, why not?
That was nice. So can we move on to the audience questions now? There are lots of questions they have to ask you. So I will just...
I don't know whether Professor Barucha wanted to say something or before we...
Would you like to say something, Professor Barucha?
No, ma'am, I'll wait for the questions. Thank you.
I think what I'll say is I'll reissue Murthy to say we will ask why not as part of the curriculum in Sai University.
Yeah.
That would be to take on from what Judge Bernard Shaw quoted by Mr. Murthy to say. Our students will be trained to ask why not. They'll ask the questions and that will be part of their learning process.
Yeah.
Thank you, Murthy.
Thank you. So the first question is very thought-provoking. How far is liberal education in alignment with our existing commitment to education for sustainable development, SDG 4, and what, according to the panelists, should be continued and what should be improved? Who would like to take the question?
Professor Barucha would be the first.
Let me make an attempt.
Yes.
See, at this level in the discussion, we're not getting down to the nitty-gritty. However, what did Professor Barucha, Ramani, and I say about the purpose of liberal education? It is about looking at the context, looking at the problems in the context, and then say, how do I proactively solve these problems? Now, everybody knows that this is the only planet we have. Therefore, sustainability is extremely important, making sure that life can continue on this planet for the future generations comfortably. Therefore, we need to do whatever is necessary, using whatever technologies are required to ensure that carbon emission is reduced, the air is pure, water is available and pure, etc., etc., etc. So this is not a conversation where we can go into specifics of each of those questions.
Dr. Barucha?
Yes, let me just add that we are constructing our campus, and that's an opportunity to create a sustainable campus, but marrying that idea with our active learning unique paradigm and our international immersive education paradigm, because we see the entire campus as being a laboratory for learning. And we will have students do projects as the campus continues to come up. For example, we have a professor of computer science, Professor Kriti Ramamritam, distinguished computer scientist who is interested in smart cities, smart buildings, and in our case, a smart campus. So students who are interested in IoT or data science, there's going to be massive amounts of data coming from sensors all over campus, measuring water, waste, energy, pollution, and so on and so forth. And that's a way in which we can make our campus a model for the world around us. And getting the students involved, see, there's a real problem right now. Most people tend to think about their own four walls. You walk into your house, you walk into your office, and throw the garbage out everywhere, okay? That there is no sense of the common good. There's no sense of it's a tragedy of the commons. We want our students to start thinking that they have a responsibility. So we'll get our students, once they build this in the campus, go beyond the campus, work with the communities, and really create a model for sustainability.
Thank you. That question was from Malati Santanam. The next question from Rajkumar Kannan is addressed to Mr. Narayanamurthy. He says, notice that most of them are chasing against IIT or premier institutions for major reasons, like fat package and settling down thereafter. This method is showcased as successful as it is projected. Is this the right method?
I didn't understand that question. What is that?
So he says that most students are chasing IITs because they apparently get good packages, IITs and premier institutions like that. And is that method successful? Is that a good way to, is that the right way to go about it?
You know what I have noticed from my own experience of about 50 years in the field is that your alma mater gives you an entry, but the moment you have entered a company, all that matters is what value you can add. I have seen so many students coming from third-tier engineering colleges perform so much better than students, some students coming from first-tier institutions, all because they have learned determination, they have learned discipline, they have learned working hard, they have learned asking the right questions, they have learned articulation, they have learned problem recognition, etc., etc. Now, therefore, what is needed in the job is really one of the skills that a place like Sai University will provide, or any institution like that will provide. So please don't worry. In life, it is always like that. There will only be so many seats in certain kinds of institutions, and one may not be able to get one of those due to various reasons. But that is not the end of life. I myself did not go to any IIT for undergraduate degree. I went to a third-tier engineering college, the National Institute of Engineering. And my father said, look, if you work hard, if you are reasonably smart, if you have good values, if you are disciplined, you can do well no matter where you study. And therefore, I think I am sitting right in front of you as a living example of what I said.
I like the way you stress constantly on values. That's really important, sir. Thank you so much. And so there's a question from an anonymous attendee who says, why do we see top performing colleges based in Delhi? And why is Tamil Nadu still lacking behind? And why can't liberal education spread to South? I think that's exactly what we are you're trying to do here, I think.
We are it. We're doing it now.
There's one more question from Malati Santanam. How to make education as a process learner-centric and community-driven? Why should the curriculum always be a map instead of compass, showing the direction for the end user to decide?
Great question. Let me comment on that on the curricular side. It's exactly spot on. The whole notion that the higher ups or the people in power can specify what we should learn is now past its due date. There was a time when that was needed, and I'm delighted to see the new education policy coming out, and I hope that it is implemented in the spirit in which I read it, which is to get the government out of the way of telling us what to learn, how to learn it, and how to assess it, and let 1,000 flowers bloom by allowing institutions to come up with different models. No prescribed curriculum. The marketplace will decide in the end which institutions are doing a good job, and I think that will transform. So I agree. The analogy is a good one, compass rather than a whole set of prescriptions, and all of the points that Mr. Murthy made are the focus of it, rather than what specific knowledge you should be tested on. Of course, there is knowledge you need to know, but much more are the kind of skills that we've talked about.
That's really nice. There's another question for Mr. Narayana Murthy. What is the Socratic mode of questioning? This word has really caught into the mind of Nachiketa Thakur, who wants to know.
What's that?
What is the Socratic model of questioning?
Okay. Well, when somebody went and told Socrates some things about some event, Socrates, of course, he lived a long time ago. He's supposed to have developed the habit of asking questions about it and go deeper and deeper and deeper into it to help both the person who recounted the incident and Socrates himself much more knowledgeable about the issue. Now, the best example of Socratic questioning is if you can go to YouTube and listen to one of the lectures of Professor Michael Sandel on justice, you will fully understand and appreciate better than my explaining it to you in a theoretical way. There are 12 lectures, and there are about probably 300 to 350 students attending that lecture, that course on justice. It's a sophomore course at Harvard. I mean, that means second year undergraduate students take that course. And it is fantastic. Every time I watch it, I learn something new. So my request to you is kindly go to YouTube and watch Professor Michael Sandel's lectures on justice.
I would just like to second that. Today, what we call active learning is exactly what Socrates was practicing. Instead of telling students what is and what is not, he extracted those answers from people. Instead of telling people, why and when and how the wheel was invented, he creates an intellectual context in which they reinvent the wheel. And I can tell you, while we don't want people to reinvent things, in the startup world, in the 3 or 4 years you have as an undergraduate, reinventing things that have already been known is the best way to learn them rather than to be told. That's exactly what Socrates, in fact, there's a famous parable that Plato wrote about Socrates where he gets a person who is totally illiterate to actually prove a geometric theorem with a stick on sand simply by asking the right questions. Now, do you think that this is larger than that? He'll do the construction. Now, what do you think about this? And the person ends up proving the theorem.
Socrates believed more in helping a person come to the answers to a question by introspection, by asking questions, rather than providing precepts, as Professor Barucha pointed out. So that is the Socratic method of questioning. And as I said, please watch this YouTube stuff. You will clearly appreciate it.
In fact, there was a question asking you to repeat the name of the course that you mentioned, and you have done it.
Professor Michael Sandel, Michael is Michael, Sandel, Sandel. Okay. The name of the course is Justice, Justice, Justice.
Thank you. There are several questions, and we're running out of time, so we'll take a few more questions till 6:45 here, and the rest of them we can send them to the university, and maybe the answers can be given later. So, yes, you wanted to say something?
Dr. Subhashi, I think we have blocked all our times till 7 o'clock. So you can't keep questions open till maybe another 10 minutes or so till you get 10 minutes to wind up the session.
Okay, another 10 minutes we can do that.
So you can, our hot stop is at 7 as we know. So you will need a few minutes to wind up so we can maybe take 10, 12 minutes more for questions.
Okay. Yeah. I believe that Ravindra GR wants to know, I believe liberal education has to start from the government-run schools and colleges. Government-run institutions are the game changers for India to attain the status of society as it exists in countries like US, France, and UK, and Australia. It's a comment. Would anyone like to comment on that?
Only thing I would say is that if you take the government to respond to our needs, every need, I don't think we can succeed. In my opinion, as responsible citizens of this country, we have to take the leadership. If we wait for government to solve our problems, it will happen, but it may happen, slowly. It may happen for a period of time that's unacceptable to us. It may not happen. There may be compulsions in terms of ideology, political differences, budgets, and the diversity of people wanting, because in Indian system, whenever we want to change something, when one person wants to change something, however good or bad it is, at least 10 other people opposing it. Well, that's the beauty of democracy, but that's a price we need to pay for a democratic system. So in a democratic system, things will move slowly because there are lots of other people opposing any new ideas, ideologies, any move to change the existing status of things. Whereas I think outside the government system, where, like for example, Sai University, as a private university approved by law and approved by UGC, we are free to set up our own syllabus. We are free to set up our own courses. We sit up to, award our own degrees. subject to the norms given by UGC, overall paradigm that's been given to UGC. They will come and inspect and ensure we have the curriculum, the teaching hours, and we have the examination system and so on and so forth in place. So we have a freedom to operate, which is not there for the government to operate. And in order for government to succeed, don't forget, they have to change the system in the school. They have to change it for several thousands in a state. If you have to change all over India, you possibly have to change several 100,000 schools. And that's going to be a humongous change. I know of some NGOs who adopted government schools and trying to change the system from within on a non-profit basis. And they have huge challenges because everybody is resisting it. The stakeholders are resisting it, the neighborhoods are resisting it, the parents are resisting it. It's not easy to change things within a system. Luckily, we are outside. We are empowered by law to do things differently, and that's what we will do. And when we set an example at Sai University, show that liberal education is the way to go, that computing and data science together makes a more unique combination in program, not just information technology as a career, but data science as a career, business analytics as a career. A combination of computing and data science can be a greater power than just computer science. When people see these examples, I'm sure other institutions will follow us as a model, and I'm sure they will change. So I think the change has to be triggered by one, and when that is successful, others will follow.
So we have embarked on an initiative.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Good.
We're partnering with a youth organization called IIMUN, which is founded by Rishabh Shah, that engages in leadership development programs for tens of thousands of high school students around India. And with them, we've created a global principals network to link up principals of schools, starting with India and then going beyond India, so that we can have webinars and so on like this, because teacher training is going to be key to answering the question. In the end, it's all going to be how the teachers in the government schools teach. You cannot blame them. They're underpaid, and we should increase the pay, but their training tends to be of a very, very traditional approach. The kinds of things we've been talking today about Socratic method, active learning, communication, critical thinking, teachers, they respond when you talk about these. You bring them the latest research on education, on early childhood development, on primary education, high school education, etc. And they thrive on this new knowledge. So we will be working with IIMUN to reach out to thousands of schools. The National Education Policy does call upon universities to engage in teacher training. And I've brought together some of the world's leaders in this as part of this initiative. Professor John Mitchell, who is a visiting professor at Sai University, who's the chairman of the Computer Science Department at Stanford, and has really joined us in helping to set up Sai University. Professor Martha Farah at University of Pennsylvania, who's a leading expert on brain development and socioeconomic. By the age of 5, so much socioeconomic disadvantage is already baked in to the brain. And so teachers really need to learn how to intervene. And the third person is Professor Robert Sternberg from Cornell, who is an expert on education and creativity. So this is going to be rolled out over the next year, and look out for it.
I want to add to what Ramani and Professor Baruch just said. I often derive inspiration from the words of extraordinary people. In a democracy, making it work for all the people requires what is termed leadership by example. Mahatma Gandhi said, be the change that you want to see in other people, or be the change that you want to see in your environment. I think that is the philosophy that institutions like Sai University can adopt, because others will see all the benefits that are accruing to the students of Sai University, the various impactful positions they will take up in the society. And over a period of time, as Sri Ramani pointed out, more and more people will adopt these changes. That is the nature of change in a democracy. The second inspirational words that I can bring to the table at this stage is what late President John F. Kennedy said at his inauguration. He said, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask instead what you can do for your country. I think this is what institutions like Sai University have to start doing before they ask the government to change. As I pointed out earlier when speaking about Mahatma Gandhi's words, once institutions like Sai University take up this model, educate their students, and their students see tremendous benefit, and they occupy positions of influence, positions of impact, and perhaps positions of power in the society, then more and more and more universities, more and more schools will automatically adopt. And, as Samuel Johnson once said, we always have to start with small things in life. Anybody who says that he will change the whole world will end up doing nothing. So therefore, I think what Professor Barucha and Sri K.V. Ramani have said are extremely valuable words, and they are leading by example. They're not just talking, they're leading by example. So let us respect their effort. Let us join effort in whatever way we can. Let us benefit from all the wonderful things that are going to happen at Sai University. That's what I would say.
Now, can we go to the next question? This is probably one of the last. Exams are a very important method to assess students' abilities other than knowledge. At present, the examination method has become mark-centric and has lost the very purpose of it. In case of liberal education, what will be the pattern of examination? And are there any other methods to assess the students?
Yes, I'll take it. One of the many findings in research on how the brain learns is that exams are actually powerful learning tools. The mistake in traditional education is to think of exams only as an assessment tool to come up with the marks or the grade. But instead of having one big final exam, the research is very clear about that. If you have smaller quizzes every week or every 2 weeks, you get the assessment, but you also get amazing amount of learning because the students get the feedback from that quiz, and then they have to take the next quiz and the next quiz. So think about exams more as learning tools, and then the assessment follows. It's also a big mistake to have high-stakes exams. So if you give quizzes every 2 weeks or whatever it is every week, or even pop quizzes, students don't like them, but years later they'll come and say, we really appreciate that. You can average that. Look at the disaster that's occurred with the school board exams during the COVID crisis. I hope after this crisis, we will simply do away with board exams or have another kind of system, because to have to expect that after 3 years of high school, 1 mark in each subject shows what you've learned is mistaken. There should be some kind of averaging across the 3 years from much more continuous assessment. The second point is assessment should also be multidimensional. And certainly at Sai, we intend, of course, it'll be up to the faculty, but we intend to encourage faculty to give a grade not just on exam results, but on written work, on the class participation, on the extent to which you've improved from wherever you started, and on your degree of preparation for your participation in class. That takes care of the attendance problem. You know, it's silly for people to take attendance at the college level. It's just completely silly. You have to motivate the students to come to class. There has to be not only the inspiration to do that, but the accountability to do that. So what I do is, each class when I've taught, I pull up a name at random, literally from a random number generator, and I pose a question based on what they were supposed to read before that class. Now I can tell you, if a student had bunked the class, they will never bunk again. If the student had failed to prepare, they will never fail to prepare again. And that's how you learn.
Thank you. What will be the difference in liberal education program offered by IIT's, the humanities program, and Sai University?
Some of the IITs are really moving very well into a more liberal model. I'm very, in close conversation with a number of the IITs, most specifically one of the new ones, IIT Gandhinagar, which is very, very innovative and is motivated by these kinds of ideas. At the end of the day, though, they are engineering institutions. And the new education policy calls for all specialty institutions to start to develop into multi-stream universities. That's what MIT did, but it's still not there. And so I think they are really thinking about this very well, but they're still stuck in thinking that there are these traditional engineering branches, civil, mechanical, electrical, and in order to get the BTech there, you have to be trained as if you were a professional. The truth of the matter is, very few civil engineering graduates or mechanical engineering graduates are actually working as civil engineers or mechanical engineers. Okay, most of them, if they get jobs, they're getting tech jobs. So there's a huge disconnect between the traditional disciplinary subject-based branch of engineering on the one hand and what the workplace requires. So that's, in that respect, I think the engineering colleges have been very slow to adapt, because there's a lot of resistance to thinking in ways different from the traditional branches of engineering.
So we have 5 minutes to close, so if you can quickly say.
Can I just add a couple of points to what Professor Barucha said, which has not been said so far? That Sai University has only been talked about today as a liberal education university. liberal education, as we defined earlier, is not just arts and sciences and humanities. It also includes schools of management, schools of business, it includes schools of law, the schools of technology, schools of medicine. So if you see the next 7-year roadmap of Sai University, we're adding a new school each year. So liberal education at Sai University, as you would see, right now we have 3 schools. Schools of arts and sciences, liberal arts and sciences, we have School of Computing Data Sciences, we have School of Law. So you already can do liberal education across 3 branches. Then we're going to have a School of Business Management, then you're going to have a School of Technology and Engineering, a School of Medicine. So when you see that happen, and the liberal education student would be able to choose their majors and minors across disciplines. As I said earlier in my definition of liberal education, silos are gone. You're no longer a mechanical engineer. You're no longer an electrical engineer. As one disciplinary, unidimensional person, you're not going to be able to solve multidimensional problems. Problems of the world, problems of the society, problems at home are multidisciplinary. So our idea is to say that it will be multidisciplinary learning, starting with 3 schools and progressively adding 4 more schools. That's 7 schools in the next 5 years. When you see that model, it'll be the most liberal education that a student can get, economics major and perhaps astronomy and maybe aeronautics minor and so on and so forth. That will solve a problem which is not being solved in the country today. I hope that answers the question. That IITs humanities are trying to come to the problem from an opposite side. The solution is they have a tech school, they're trying to add humanities as a minor. But we are saying that not enough. We have to have multiple schools, let's say 7, 8, 9, 10 schools, equal importance. And a student will be able to select major from one and minor from the other. You could do an economics major and health sciences minor, and maybe a physics minor. So that is the way Sai University multidisciplinary will evolve, and that is the liberal education that we will provide, and that's how it's different from others. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Raman. Thanks to all the 3 speakers. We have reached the end of our program today. It was very interesting, and the audience was excellently active and sending a lot of questions. The questions that remain unanswered, we will send them to the respective people and pursue this. So thank you all, and let us wind up for today. Thank you, Mr. Narayanamurthy. Thank you, Mr. Maruchan, and thank you, Mr. Marnamuru. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bashir, for moderating the session. Has been enlightening experience for us, and I hope the viewers also had an enlightening experience. And if you do need more information of Sai University, do visit our websites and our social media sites. Thank you once again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks to everybody. You know, I may not be able to answer the questions because I am doing a lot of things. So I hope youngsters will understand.
Yes. I meant we will send them to Sai University and maybe.
Definitely.
Yeah, we'll arrange to have all of them replied, Dr. Bashir.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Murthy. Thank you, Jamshed, and thank you, Dr. Bashir, and thank the entire Hindu team from Mr. Sridhar Nala, Ms. Tyagarajan, Ms. Manivannan, Ms. Shanmugam, Ms. Varsha, all of them who made this event possible along with Dr. Subhashi. And it's been a very enriching experience for us. We do look forward to more enriching experiences in partnership with Hindu to share with the other members in other communities in our other webinars. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I will log off now, Ramani.
Yes, Murthy, thank you.
Take care. Thanks.